Hello, everyone. Welcome to Miami Beach Urban Studios. My name is Colette Mello, and you are at Miami Beach Urban Studios, known as MBUS. We are an incubator for architecture, art, and design. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the Miami Beach Department of Tourism and Culture for sponsoring these talks and for their continued support throughout these difficult times. Jennifer Basile is a Miami-based artist and professor of studio art at Miami-Dade College. She works in printmaking, drawing, painting, and installation. She's an environmentalist that depicts pristine landscapes and animals. She has been in numerous exhibitions and residencies throughout the country, such as the Vermont Studio Center, Kala Art Institute in California, and the Jentel Foundation in Wyoming. Her work is in the collection of the Bernice Steinbaum Gallery, Museum of Art and Design, Freedom Tower, and the Museum of Art, Tucson Museum of Art. She is represented by LnS GALLERY. Before I hand it over to Jennifer, I'd just like to mention to everyone that if you have any comments or questions, to make them through the chat function, and I will try to get to them throughout our conversation. So, hi, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us today. It's great that you agreed to be part of this talk.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Colette and Ray, for doing the groundwork and making this possible. And I want to give a shout out to my compadre, Jennifer Prince. Thank you so much for recommending me. I can feel the female artist love. So thank you so much. I guess what I should do is just share my screen. Yeah. And
sure.
we can start with that. I'm going to talk about a couple of different things today. I'm going to talk a little bit about, just give me 1 second here. Sorry about that. I want you to see it as this. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about how long I've been here, and over 20 years I've been here in Miami-Dade County, and I started my education here as well. But, you know, it really wasn't until the last, I want to say 10 to 15 years of being here that I really started to have the time to put the energy into plugging away at my art career. And then, yeah, as you know, I've been teaching Miami-Dade for a while, and it has helped me in different ways. It has helped connect me to the community, and it's enriching to be with young people all day who have new ideas and fresh thoughts, and can very often be inspiring. So I do appreciate my teaching career. I've never felt for 1 second that this was a fallback because I can't make ends meet as an artist. I've always enjoyed sharing as much information as I know about making art. I've never been the type of artist to sort of hold the secrets of the field close to my chest and not share. I just believe that sharing is the platform for things in the universe to come back to you as well. So I'm all about that. This image is my tools. So I thought it'd be interesting because a lot of people don't know exactly what it is I do. I am a printmaker. I do draw, I do paint. But I made a commitment to printmaking somewhere around 2005 when I was at the Bakehouse Art Complex. You know, it took some time for me to come to that. Part of coming to that was, you know, not having the means or the accessibility to the print shop, even where I taught at the time. And I thought, well, what can I do? I can definitely do relief prints, which is interesting because I did some of it in undergrad and in grad work, but not as my main focus. So here you're looking at some really nice Japanese woodcut tools, and this on the bottom here is a sharpening leather that has compound on it, because everyone knows that sharpening your tools is one of the most important parts of being able to make good art. So I'll start here with this piece. This was the first one that I decided I was going to be committed to the process. And One of the things I learned I didn't love about printmaking was actually editioning, which is sort of interesting because that's the platform for printmaking. You can edition, you can make multiples, and there's your drawing, and you can make lots of them. But after being trained so well in a big Midwest school for printmaking, I was exhausted by making 40 prints and 60 prints and 100 prints that looked identical. I mean, so I can do that process, but as an artist, I just was not interested in that. And I think it has to do with the fact that I've always been a little drawn to sculpture. So this printmaking in relief for me was the perfect combination of drawing together both my interest as a sculptor and interest as a 2D artist. So this piece is actually not a print, it's the actual wood blocks that are mounted and hung on the wall. And I started with the Florida landscape of the Osceola pines. I had done some visiting up north and sort of just fell in love with the pines of Florida. And as an artist, you'll see there's a repeat theme of texture, light, positive, negative space, and grandiosity in a way. Just how, you know, that feeling that you get when you're out in the landscape is something that I'm always trying to depict. So after yes.
I'm going to ask you about, you're talking about your editions. So you don't do more than one?
Okay, so in order to make one in the edition, I have to print more than one.
Okay.
So, you know, as a printmaker, you pull what they call proofs until the block is up, meaning that it is inked fully, and you know you're getting a consistent print. So there's often an artist proof, which is the last proof, and that is the one that you base the one of one, or what I have a one of one print off of. Because, you know, especially at some of the scales that I work at, this print, for example, is an 8-foot by 20-foot print. I started to get real ambitious after that last one, and got some thin birch ply pieces and went ahead and did this piece. So you can see how from the smaller one, I arrived at this. And this was all hand cut and hand printed. I'll tell you when I've used the press. Most of the time, the only time I've used the press is when I'm working in that 3-foot by 4-foot format, which is still not small. But, you know, if I'm working on this scale, then it's all printed by hand. And this, yes.
I'm sorry, what are you doing with so do you always keep your wood blocks and display them afterwards, or?
No, I cancel them. So canceling a wood block involves either cutting a big X through the center of it, or what I do is I just cut it up into hundreds of little pieces and I throw it away.
Wow.
Which is painful for a lot of printmakers, but not for me for some reason. It's okay. Like I'm done with it. I moved on. I went through my cathartic process of cutting, which I love and enjoy. I printed the print I wanted, and now it needs to go. I was always struck when I was learning art history about the fact that Rodin's molds were still around, and they just started casting them, and he wasn't around. And right. You know, that stuck with me forever. And so I thought, as a printmaker, you know, not that I'm not Rodin, but I don't want anyone touching my blocks or printing them. And those were lessons learned by throwing things away in the dumpster at a collective artist place, and then finding it pulled out of the dumpster in someone else's studio later. And, you know, I'm like, okay, that's where I draw the line in the sand. You don't get to do what I did. You know, you can emulate, you can be in admiration and try things out, but don't be using my art, is kind of
really, yes.
What I feel about that. So I just want to talk about this really quickly, because one of the other things, this is the exact same print. So this is the artist proof, and I installed it in somebody's conference room. And it was a huge challenge. I had never done anything like this before. All of these prints were mounted on 1/4-inch thick birch, and then mounted to the wall. And then, of course, the person I was creating this for said, well, can you put the negative space of the windows on, can you put the print on the shades? And something I learned very long time ago from my mentor, my very first art mentor, was always tell them you can do it, even if you don't think you can, and you'll probably end up doing it, which is exactly what happened here. I was like, oh, sure. You know, and I took these blinds and was having a major heart attack, but because lining this up, of course, is very difficult. But it was exciting to see prints in a different way. And so as much as I love a traditional print, a lithograph, you know, an engraving, an intaglio, I also want to see, what do you do beyond the frame? How do you move your prints, this is the long wall, beyond the frame and make it something you live with? So this was the first experience I had ever had doing that. This piece, and I will give credit that, I mean, this idea or concept was asked of me by Bernice Steinbaum. She said, do you think you can do that? Of course, I was like, sure.
Really fantastic. Yes.
And it was great because it pushed me and challenged me as an artist in ways that made me a little uncomfortable. And then you overcome that hurdle, which is something I'm always telling students. It's okay to be uncomfortable. That's the good place. That's where you're really investigating and making change in your work. And so this piece was a group show I was in. It was a small, you know, this is a small print that I mounted on a piece of wood. And I was still thinking about that window context and the positive, negative. And so I drew the rest of the landscape literally on the wall in the gallery with ebony pencil. I mean, God help those people that had to turn this wall around because it was ebony pencil. But nothing is more beautiful to me than an ebony pencil because of its density and its slickness. And it just worked really well with the print. And so this idea of living with the print is partially installed and partially something that you can hang and own on your own wall. So this piece is actually in Bernice Steinbaum's home on her bathroom door. And interesting enough, and this is one of the pieces or one of the images I took while I was at my residency in Vermont. I had hiked Mount Mansfield, which was an incredible hike, very rigorous hike, because, you know, up there it's straight up and then you come back down. And as again, you can see, it's all about light, shape, form, texture, the different textures of the foliage, etc. And she has said, well, do you think you can make it look like, you know, the woods is on the door? And I said, sure, again, and had a heart attack. But you know, I took the door with me. I mounted everything myself, which was not easy. First by putting paper down and then putting the print down, because all these prints are on Japanese rice paper, which is somewhat translucent. And then we reinstalled the hardware and put the door back up. And Bernice definitely enjoys telling people that we go to the bathroom in the woods in her house. So, so it's been fun. And the reason why you should never say no, students, and you should always say yes, is, like I said before, challenging yourself is the most important thing that you can do as an aspiring artist. And this led me to meeting the gallery dealers that carry my work today, because they were meeting with her one afternoon and saw this piece and asked them and said, wow, who is that? And she said, it's Jennifer Basile. And you know, my artist, she's not contracted by me, so she's a free agent. And that was the end of that. And then I ended up being signed with LnS Gallery with Sergio and Luisa Lignorolo. And it's been a wonderful experience ever since. They're highly encouraging, and I love their programming and how they incorporate the community into the things that they show. This is the last version of that piece you saw the first time around. So this was installed in the MOAD Museum when we used to have faculty shows in the museum. And at this point, I was like, how do I show this piece in a way that makes people want to hang out? And so what I did was I took my old blocks, which is what you're seeing here. Those are old blocks that I roto cut out and mounted the print on the reverse side. So I had the block and then I had the print, so they were perfectly facing. And I decided to sort of make this little area that you can sit in so that you felt that you were in the woods. And there's the bench. And of course, I just played with the lighting so that we could get the shadows on the seat of the bench. I matched the paint to the ink. I had help building this curvilinear seat, by the way. It wasn't done by me alone. I had some help from a master wood craftsman. But that was sort of the last variation of it. And I've shown it that way again. Professor John Bailey at FIU had curated a show with his students in his aesthetics and values course. And they selected me as an artist, and I exhibited there as well. It's a super fun piece because everyone wants to get involved, really literally sit there and get in. I mean, the amount of selfies that happen with this piece is incredible. I love it.
It's a selfie work. I can
absolutely. And it was interesting is it was the first time I thought about my prints, in a different way. So that led to also creating three-dimensional forms with my prints. And so at some point, and what maybe students don't know is that professors have to do one of two things. You either maintain the rank that you were hired in, associate, assistant, associate, or you are changing your rank. And so in order to change rank and get to full professor, I had to do a special project. And this is specific to Miami-Dade, I will say, because everywhere else, your M.F.A is considered a terminal degree. But I did this special project with Bernice Steinbaum back when we had those Wynwood art fairs. And I built these mangrove benches because I loved how people wanted to be a part of that print and wanted to be in that landscape. And so there was 3 of them. These are stools, and that was also a challenge, just having people sit on it. And is it the right, can it hold weight? How am I going to put these 2 pieces together and have it make sense? Do I address the edges? These are all things that I thought about while making these pieces. And these, these are my wood blocks that I cut out and then mounted the print on the opposite side. This is the largest of the mangrove series. This is a 2-seater bench. So each length of this mangrove is 8 feet on the floor. So it's kind of large. And that was an interesting thing because everyone wanted to sit on it the entire show. So all of Bernice's gallery people that worked for her were like, please don't sit on the bench. Please don't sit on the bench, which I loved. I loved that people just automatically wanted to sit on it. It's always that weird juxtaposition of, as an artist, you want people to touch and be involved, but also they kind of shouldn't. So it's a fun place to experiment for sure. I'm putting these in there because it's going to come up again later. I've always been interested in repeat patterns, and culturally, being Italian, growing up in New York, I was bombarded with wallpaper patterns all over in relatives' homes and things of that nature. And so I started to experiment. This was at the Vermont Studio Center residency. This is it's an 8-foot by 8-foot repeat. And I never did anything with it. I still have them in the drawer, and it might be because they need to make a guest appearance again. And that's something students need to know too. Just because you made something doesn't make it great, and it doesn't make it something that you're actually going to use. I mean, this is okay. To me, it's not anything to write home about. It's kind of basic, but I had to go through that process. And I had to remind myself that I had skills enough to do what is called in this image color reduction, where you roll a color and print it, cut the block, roll another color, cut the block, and you just keep doing that, and you reduce that block until there's very little left but your black lines. So I did that. And then when I came home, I did have a residency at the Charles Deering Estate in 2009. So I was the very first. They had just thought about having resident artists at Deering, and Jennifer Tischhammer was so wonderful. And I got invited back for an alumni show, and I wanted to make wallpaper for the cottage house at the Deering Estate property. And I did a repeat of anhingas because that's one of the birds that you see most frequently in that area. And I was trying to pick patterns that were of the time period of the 20s, and just trying to really sort of bring a contemporary color to it. It's like I said, it's not something that I'm like, woo, hey, let's whip that out again, or maybe I will at some point. Maybe it needs something else. But this was quite a large piece, and they're 4 foot by 8 foot panels, and I don't know how many of them there.
I love it. I love
Really
it.
long. Yeah, I had to fill the room, so it was a fun project to do. So the other thing I want to talk to everybody about, especially I know I have a student audience today, so I want to make sure that I inspire students. Drawing is paramount, and that is the one thing that all the professors are constantly, I'm looking at some professors here on this side, they're going, drawing is paramount. And when you have an idea, the best way to work through the idea is through sketches. And so I frequently sketch with ballpoint pens, just plain paper-made ballpoint pens. And I had this project that I was doing where I was trying to make an iconic image of New York. And these are all from my own photographs. I did go to New York, and I have family there, and I photographed and so on. And so this was the iconic image. It took all day for me to realize walking to Penn Station was going to be the iconic image. And shortly after that, I created this relief piece. It's also quite large, also printed by hand. Huge challenge in trying to replicate the textures of the different architecture, but I loved it. It was fun. It was gut-wrenching, but it was a neat experience and different from depicting regular landscape. Once again, I'm trying to show you how I've taken an image and shown it in a different way. And so during my solo show, and then once again, there's a repeat pattern behind the print. So I wanted to show the New York piece as if you were in a New York home. So it's really literally like an empire repeat pattern with the thick molding on and the crown molding at the top, just to sort of give you that feeling of a New York room where you would be looking through a window, maybe at the Empire State Building. These are some more large pieces. This is the one I made in Vermont. This is also a 6 foot by 8 foot print, hand printed, cut out of linoleum. I switch between wood and linoleum all the time. I get excited about doing linoleum, and then I get excited about wood and realize how much more difficult that is to cut and go back to linoleum. I think linoleum best suits my type of mark making. I've sort of just decided that recently. This is Mount Mansfield. So always experimenting with shape, form. This piece is also a large piece that I did for LnS's one of their first exhibitions of all their artists. And the theme was oolite. And so I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And it just so happened I was in the Keys and I saw this and I thought, that's really what I need to do. What a challenge to try to create water and have more of an empty type of a landscape, but still depict water, sky, air, and all the different elements that you would find in a landscape, in the Keys. So constantly just pushing the envelope on scale, textures. All of these images are from traveling to national parks and state parks. And a lot of these images have ballpoint pens, but I can't bombard you all with a million images a night. Mangroves have been.
Sorry, so you said you travel a lot, and then you're doing your own photography. So these are not images that you're appropriating from the internet or anything. They're all yours.
The only time I've appropriated imagery is when I need to get a really good photograph of an animal, because I'm not going to get that close to an alligator.
Okay.
I'm just not doing it. No, I'll get close to an alligator, but I'm not going to bend down and take my time taking a perfect image, but all the landscapes are mine. Absolutely. And that's another thing I tell students, stop appropriating imagery and start thinking about your own imagery and how you can use photographic references that are your own. This is also the mangroves. And I have this habit of starting a little bit more open and a little more abstract, and then getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And it's almost like a game with myself of where I'm kind of like, oh, well, really, how much can I really show through this medium? And it's wonderful challenge. This is Oleta. Both of these images, this image and this image, you would find just paddling through Oleta River State Park. A great place to paddle, of course, when we're not poisoning the water. So, And then this came about because students in my classroom were like, you know, Professor, you're always making us do these color prints, but we don't see you doing them. So I was like, oh, you guys are so silly. I made this piece. And this is about 3 feet by 4 foot. This is also a color reduction print. And this is from a trip I took to go see the total solar eclipse in South Carolina. We went to Bull Island. And this is called Boneyard Beach because of all these sort of huge pieces of tree driftwood that you would find. I was totally inspired. And I mean, this is a huge piece. Like you would fit standing underneath it. So that was a fun challenge. Even the palette itself was an interesting challenge. So I get around, you know, this is upstate New York. It's a place I've visited for at least 15 to 20 years with my mentor. He has a cabin up there. And this is a special favorite hike of ours that we like to do, the Flume Trail. Again, playing this idea of positive, negative shape. You can see this is completely solid. So, you know, how do you make things look or feel like they have depth with this medium through the different positive, negative shapes you leave and the mark making. Same spot. This is also—
Sorry, Jennifer, I have a question from—
Sure.
I think it was regards to, is it boneyard work? It says, did you have to addition this color reduction?
Yeah, I mean, I had to print, I think I made 6 because I needed a few that would go off register because it's the story of your life as a printmaker. There's always 1 or 2 that go off register. So I needed the cushion, but it is a 1 of 1 with an artist proof. So all the rest of the prints that I made are cached, torn up small and used for other things. Okay. So yeah, you have to, because like I said, you do make, I'm a human, you know, so I make mistakes. But you know, it's always an interesting challenge. That's what I love about printmaking. I just, sometimes when I make just a drawing, I feel like, oh, but there's just a little bit more I can say. And that happens with these interesting shaped tools when you do this cutting process. These prints I made while I was at my fellowship at Kala. This is interesting enough to me. This is one of the best prints I've made. I'm not tooting my horn. I'm just saying that it has the most involvement in terms of mark making and grayscale, which is a difficult thing to do in relief prints. And while I was out there, I got to take a free class. So I took an intaglio class. I know how to do intaglio, but you can always learn more from different printmakers. And I did. I learned to use Dutch mordant solution with copper plates and soft ground and draw with a pencil onto the soft ground, because one of the things I was complained about was that my etchings looked too linear because of the tools I was using. And so this gave me that freedom to do that. And it was printed in a process called chine-coller, which is where you're printing and gluing basically, essentially at the same time. And so there's a very thin, ridiculously thin piece of rice paper called Gompi that I've printed it on and stuck to a much thicker piece of paper all at the same time. It was something I learned out there, and I actually did pay the studio shop assistant to help me edition this. This is an edition. It's a variable edition, which means that there's multiples of this image and they're all printed differently. They're all different colors, different times of day colors, like evening, daytime, just messing around with colors. So if I am going to do an edition, it's going to be that they're all slightly a variation of one another with the same matrix image. So I did 2 of those. This one's my favorite. And these are from the same references as those 2 large relief prints that I showed. This is my favorite one though. This is the most like my drawings with my ballpoint pen and so on.
Beautiful.
These, again, you know, I was in California, so you cannot be in Northern California and not go to Muir Woods. So there was lots of hiking for me in Muir Woods. And I was blown away. I had never been out there before. I'd never seen redwood trees or experienced the grandiosity of those trees. And you are always looking up. And I had already done the New York piece where I was looking up. So one of the things I tell students all the time is that point of view in your composition really can make it or break it. So always messing around with point of view. Same, Muir Woods, always investigating things in 2s, 4s, or 6s in terms of how many images I'll make of the same area. And then I just got laser focused on Florida because I was homesick. I was in California love California, love Northern California, love it. But I was homesick, believe it or not. And I started to miss Florida. And so all my images started to become towards the end of the fellowship about Florida. And I love the Florida grasses. These are sawgrasses from trips I've taken on airboat rides. This is a great blue heron. And they're magnificent. I'm a nerd, I'm a birder. Both my partner and I get out and go birding and try to, oh, that's this bird, that's an osprey, you know, and name the birds. They're magnificent, but I've seen a lot of people do birds in printmaking, but not include them in their environment. And so this was an interesting challenge to try to create this bird and have it in its Everglades environment, be able to convey to you what's going on with the texture of that landscape and the water. So, you know, and these are my small prints. So these are about 2 feet by 4 feet. I thought I'd include an image of myself working on my block. So this was the Florida gator that I did. And it's life size. So it's an 11-foot print of an alligator. And it took me quite some time to cut and ink. I did have help. This is a photograph taken by a fellow artist who is at the Kala Art Institute. And there's me with my glass frog baron printing, because thank God people figured out that glass barons are the best barons for hand printing.
Oh.
I mean, Japanese barons are nice when you're doing mokuhanga, but when you're doing this method, the glass is fantastic. So
I have a question from, it says, is there a large size linoleum or are they pieced together to make a large piece?
So linoleum comes in 1 foot, 2 foot, and 3 foot wide by however many feet you want to buy it. So I started with 1 footers. So the earlier work you saw was pieced through panels. The later work is also pieced panels, but 3 feet wide. So I generally will buy a 3 foot wide by 90 foot roll of linoleum. It's heavy as hell. So make sure if you're going to do it, make sure it's shipped to the door. It's very, very heavy. Yeah, so you can buy by the foot, and I buy it through Blick. Nice battleship gray linoleum, simple as stuff that all the students are using in their relief in their printmaking class. And so here's my alligator Ernie. They have names. So I don't know why I felt his name was Ernie, but I did. And then, you know, it's San Francisco, and how do you not do, after I did an iconic print of New York, of the Empire State Building, how do I not do an iconic print of the Golden Gate Bridge? And just trying to capture the fog over the top of the bridge was a challenge in itself. And this is actually quite large too. This is a 6 foot by 8 foot print as well. And this was a reduction and printed by hand. So it was really difficult. I'm gonna try to do some more of these, but they're very time consuming. And when you're printing by yourself, it's incredibly difficult to pull prints at the scale and then put them down in the same place. And so when I made this one, for those of you that are wondering, well, how many did she really make to get this one? I made 3 because I just could not physically print more than that. It was just a lot of work. So I'm showing you this. This is from my solo show, because remember earlier I told you I like repeats. And I was thinking they have this really cool installation room at LnS Gallery. What can I do in there that echoes my printmaking and echoes my fascination with repeats? And I came up with this idea of a Florida room, because I mean, I'm a native New Yorker, obviously. I'm not a Floridian, But I've been coming to Florida since I'm probably about 5 years old to visit family. And everyone had a Florida room, which is this room off the back of your house with little jalousie windows and maybe some fake astroturf and some chairs and like a coffee table, and you sit out there. And so that's where the concept came from. And so the artist proofs of the alligator print and of Stanley, the great blue heron, became sculptural pieces in the installation. So these were mounted, cut out and mounted, and then standing in the space. There is the block. So there's me using the block again as an actual artwork, framed artwork on the wall. And this is all 3D printed crocodiles. So I am worried about our animals down here. And I don't know if you guys are aware of the fact that crocodiles and alligators are on the endangered species list. And it's interesting that we are the only place in the world that has these two creatures cohabitating, because one is a saltwater, crocs are saltwater, alligators are freshwater. So unique to Florida. It was really trying to create that kitschy sort of 50s, even the colors, the mustard chair was perfect to go with this light purple pillows, which are a repeat pattern of one of my drawings. So these are the drawings, again, that I do to investigate, to study for larger pieces that I basically sent to a company and had them printed on cotton fabric as a repeat. And then I had a student who sewed really well, and I paid her to sew the pillows together for my show, because I don't sew really well. That was the one thing I didn't learn from my grandmother.
So you mentioned you did the 3D printing. How often do you incorporate other technologies into your work?
Not often. I mean, the college has gotten a bunch of new equipment, and I'm curious and excited about it. And I thought, well, how can I use these applications to fit my work? It took a while to come to that conclusion. And I'm not the kind of person that's actually going to make the entire artwork about that, but I love using the technology as a component. I haven't visited that again, but I know it's not going away, because ideas don't go away. You sort of always go out on your investigation and you circle back. I mean, that's why artists are so much like scientists, because everything is an experiment so that you can come to some conclusions. And again, here is another installation where I'm using a repeat. I created on a laser cutter at school a repeat of antlers. And use that as a stencil on the wall. And these are drawings of sandhill cranes. Because when I was at my residency in Wyoming, I realized that sandhill cranes are both there and here, depending on what time of year it is. And they're beautiful, beautiful birds. So I created these drawings. They're on the wall. They're actually magnets. So I figured out how to buy magnet material and a sheet mount, because I've had experience mounting prints and paper, so I knew how to mount them on the magnet, and then just paint a silhouette of the material, the magnetic paint material, to put it on the wall. And then these are ballpoint pen drawings. Again, ballpoint pen drawings on stained paper that I did in my residency at Jentel. I also picked out the molding, the crown molding, so that it always feels like I'm creating an environment for my work to sit in. It's really the most fun for me. So these are the last few pieces I did, because one of my collectors was like, hey, can you make mangroves in color? And remember what I said, students, the answer is always sure. Okay. And I always say I'm going to do this in fewer colors, and I never do. So this is sort of like a 9 or 10 color reduction print that I did. This is the keys. And then I did do, these are buttonwood, which is sometimes called mangroves as well. And then this is Olita again. So there's a third image, once again, of the mangroves in Olita. And I'm not done with mangroves entirely. I find them absolutely fascinating. One of the most important aspects of the Florida landscape. They shore up, they protect the shoreline, they protect small species, and they protect us from hurricanes, which is the most important thing. And we spend a lot of time ripping them out. So I'm hoping we continue to protect them and regrow them. lastly, this is the last image I have. So this is where I'm at right now, because recently I had an experience with Houston Cypress from the Miccosukee tribe. And he is a Two-Spirit tribe member, so I know him on multiple levels. I know him because he's participated in our Pride Week at Miami-Dade and came and spoke about Two-Spirit. And I also know him because he's an advocate for the landscape. And he promotes Love the Everglades. You can look it up, Love the Everglades, Houston Cypress. And he took myself and about 15 other people out on an airboat ride to the island his family owns in the middle of Big Cypress. It was the most amazing experience I've ever had, because most airboat rides are timed and you're done and you go in. And this was a long airboat ride to his family's island, to which I learned that the Miccosukee all own islands inside Big Cypress that they would stay at, and they would use, you know, fish from the water and hunt and all this kind of stuff. And there's some really interesting stories behind the island and who lived on it beforehand. But now my work has really been focused on the Everglades, a lot of focus on the Everglades. I'm very worried, I'm very concerned about Lake Okeechobee, and when we allow that to spill over, and all the farms with the runoff that are in between. And so I'm really always trying to help you feel inspired about landscapes and see the intrinsic value and beauty in them and why we should protect them. I'm not the artist that's going to paint all the plastic bags, and all that work is also valid. So, you know, it's just for me personally, I see that when I'm hiking and I find it, you know, upsetting and concerning and depressing. And I even volunteer to clean up here in Florida, but I want to depict what it should be or what it's not going to be by leaving negative spaces, by doing it black and white. So this was the very last print. I have another one in the shop I just made, and some on the presses that are new that I can't share with you just yet, and including, so you'll have to go to LnS Gallery. I did start an entire series of oil bar drawings. You know, necessity is the mother of invention. So, like, you know, when you can't have something, then you got to rethink it. That's the beauty of being artists, is that you can think outside the box and try to problem solve. And so, you know, I had no access to presses or a large area with surfaces to hand print. And so I was in my studio here off of Bird Road, and I bought canvas. And I said to myself, do what you know. That's where you started. You started in painting and drawing and ceramics, believe it or not. And then you made this switch to printmaking in undergrad school. So why not go back to doing some of the things that you used to do? And those will be at LnS Gallery shortly. So I think that draws the conclusion of all the images. I'm gonna stop sharing and see if anybody has any other questions. I mean, I do want to tell students something very important, which is, for me as an artist, when I was a student, the most valuable thing major artists told me was never give up, period. So the point of that is that lots of things get in the way. Life gets in the way. You get dealt a bad hand. You're busy building your academic career and you don't have as much time to make your art like you did when you were part-time. All those things come into play, but if you never give up, it's going to be fine. That's the one thing I want to tell students. If you're passionate about it, it's important enough to you, you're willing to be disciplined and do what it is you need to do, there should be no reason why you shouldn't succeed. So.
Good advice. I like also where you say, always say yes. I kind of follow that. And sometimes like, why did I say yes? Now I've got to figure this out. It's really hard. So, but right. I think that it's a good, I always like to challenge myself. So I think, and it's a good to be afraid a little bit of trying to figure it out.
I mean, I'd be perfectly honest. I'm a finalist for an Art in Public Places project right now, and I'm absolutely beside myself because I've never made it this far, and now I have, and I don't know what I'm doing. But you'd be surprised, because if you just keep the faith and reach out to people in the community. I met someone today who was so helpful. He goes, well, look at this artist thing we did, and look at, and you can do this and you can do that. And so now I'm feeling a little more confident. I'm still very nervous, but it's important for me to go through this process. It doesn't matter if I make it to be the one or not. What matters right now at this point is going through that process and learning all those steps you need to take.
Exactly. It's a learning process. That's great.
Absolutely.
So I have, I'm going to open up. I have a few more minutes if someone would like to ask some questions. I have one person that said, beautiful work. I would like to know about your gallerist relationship and how that has evolved through the years.
Okay. It was not easy. I mean, you know, as a younger artist, you're there, you're trying to bring your work to galleries. And I didn't have a lot of luck with that. I didn't get a lot of love from Miami in the beginning of my career at all, to be perfectly honest. I just kept applying for things. And that is really where I think you need to be at. Apply. This is going to be the 9th time I've applied for the Florida Consortium grants. And I can't, I'm just going to keep applying till I get it. That's really important. And that's part of that, don't give up. In terms of finding gallerists, like I said, it was very difficult. And I think it's important to look at galleries and see if you're a fit. You know, there's a reality to selling artwork that doesn't get taught in school. Can I sell it? Is it marketable? Will it meet expectations of my clients in that gallery? Is my gallerist the kind of person that's trying to pay the bills doing this career, or is this just something that's a hobby? Is my gallerist well connected? Do they have a good reputation? Did they study art history? You know, those are things I think that are important, because you don't want somebody just selling one piece and another piece and another piece. You want somebody that is championing you and really sort of creating a program about you and moving you forward. And that's one of the things I love and feel blessed with LnS, with Sergio and Luisa, because they are really, you know, it's not just, oh, okay, this person likes her print. It's, you know, creating a whole culture around my work, a culture around printmaking, educating people what printmaking is, telling people it's okay to buy works on paper. This whole stigma of buying work on paper is ridiculous, in my opinion. That's not their opinion, it's my opinion. But, you know, and that's the important part. And I can't help but say, being at the Bakehouse for 7 years was extremely helpful. Being a professor was helpful. Having sisters in the community that invite you to opportunities and suggest you for things is also imperative. And, you know, I met Bernice because I was at the Bakehouse and they asked her to curate and jury the artists. And she came to my studio and said she saw 2 types of work. She saw more illustrative work that was drawings, and she saw my huge wood block I was working on. And she goes, no one's doing this. This is what you need to do. This is you. You should do this. And it was super important, because that started that whole track of being committed to the printmaking and keep going and keep going. My experience with her was invaluable. She included me in lots of different things. Her artists are wonderful people, you know, and then I found Luisa and Sergio, you know, and so in terms of my relationship with them, we're like a family. They have to be able to tell me when things don't work. I have to be able to take it when I do. You know, not everything is all rosy pictures. Oh, you know, I made this work and they're selling it. No, it's not like that. It's like there's framing involved. Maybe my print got damaged or I dented it, which I did. I had a print where there was a huge dent in it and it became this whole problem. But they're always supporting me and they genuinely love my work. And I think that's important when you're working with a gallerist. Are they genuinely loving your work? That would be my best piece of advice.
Well, I think that's a really good note to end on this talk. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to hear about your practice and learn about your work. I'm going to ask everyone if they'd like to unmute and, you know, say hello to you and give you a virtual round of applause.
Can we do that?
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
It's great to see your work, Jen.
Yay. Thank you, Hannah.
Yay.
Thank you so much. You guys are wonderful for supporting me. Thank you a million times.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to meeting you face to face sometime after we get on the other side of this pandemic and working with you. So thank you again. And everyone have a really good evening. Thank you for joining us. And we'll have another art talk next Monday.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Great
Bye.
talk. Thank you.